And so a lot of families are finding individual reasons to remove their children from the public school environment, violence and bullying being one of those issues.
Illinois has plenty of challenges.
This is just a sampling of some of the comments that were made about education yesterday at the Illinois Statehouse. It was Cherry Pie Day with homeschoolers on location to lobby lawmakers to help them understand their perspective of why they feel they need homeschooling and independence and freedom in the education choice. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Last segment, we talked about the Trump administration aiming to close the Department of Education, Pritzker's response here at Illinois as the governor, and a Republican state representative responding as well. So if you missed that, be sure to either live here, rewind and catch that, or you can catch the segment when we get that up later this morning at the Center Square on YouTube. But yesterday, education was a big component. There were hundreds of families on location at the Capitol, a lot of them carrying around full cherry pies to take to their legislators while they looked to lobby legislators to support homeschooling. Now, what's interesting in Illinois, you've got, of course, public schools, you've got charter schools in some areas, then you've got a whole slew of private and parochial schools. We used to have the Invest in Kids School Choice Scholarship Program, but that was ended by Democrats not willing to extend it, and it gave a tax benefit, tax break to individuals who privately donated funds into a fund to fund school scholarships for school choice. For parents to say, I want to take my kid out of public school that's failing them and put them into a private school. Well, again, that tax credit scholarship program ended, so we don't have that choice anymore. But homeschooling's there, and homeschooling happens. How many people are homeschooled? Not sure. There's been some reports of problems with some homeschools that aren't benefiting the children, and some anecdotal evidence here and there with some investigative reports that are delving into the issue of how problematic homeschooling can be because there's no oversight, no regulation. Well, if you talk to homeschool parents, they'll push back and say, turn the mirror around back on the public school system, especially when you look at the proficiency rates, especially when you look at the stories out of Chicago, which, it seems like every year you get, headline after headline of, different types of abuse that may be happening in the public system, and then the overall cost of it, right? And the homeschool parents, they still pay property taxes, but they're not sending their kids to public schools. They're deciding to take the time out of their own days and teach their kids at home. And a lot of it is faith-based. A lot of it is, focused on family issues and moral issues and real world issues. I've had friends in the past who were homeschooled. They may have had some social anxieties or kind of stuck out like a sore thumb when you're hanging out with a bunch of public school kids, but they were smart. They were with it. They're very productive now. I compare that to some others in public school, and the outcomes, at least anecdotally from what I have seen, it's all right. But still, you have an effort at the State House. To require parents who homeschool their kids to report that to the local school district and eventually to the state. Because right now there is no mandate. If you have your kids in homeschool, the state doesn't really track that. So there's an effort at the State House to track that. I'm not sure what the reason would be to track it, other than to, in a way, have the state bureaucracy come knocking on doors and whatnot. And a law that's proposed by State Representative Tara Costa Howard this session would essentially say you have to report your homeschooling efforts. You have to, match certain criteria. You have to, have a certain curriculum and these types of things that I think homeschool parents are just fed up even thinking about that possibly becoming law. So with the prospect of the Homeschooling Act, which is State Representative Tara Costa Howard's measure, that says if you don't report your kids that you're homeschooling them to the local school district, they're going to be counted as truant. So will that advance at the State House? We shall see. But a group of legislators and homeschool parents yesterday took to the State House to raise an alarm about that measure and to say that homeschooling needs to have freedom.
We're also joined by some great homeschool ambassadors who are our future leaders. They represent thousands of students who are at the Capitol today.
This legislation is infringement on those rights. Not only does House Bill 2827 create new mandates and new regulations, but is a start of a slippery slope. It starts by making small changes And like most policies here in Illinois, it keeps chipping away more and more from homeschool families.
The homeschool growth is tremendous in Illinois, and so a lot of families are finding individual reasons to remove their children from the public school environment, violence and bullying being one of those issues.
Illinois has plenty of challenges. We all know that. It's not a secret. We watch the news. But homeschooling is frankly not one of those challenges. It's not a problem. It's a solution.
So parents obviously finding that educational choice as something they think's right for their family and their children, but you've got the homeschool families that are pushing back against that. K through 12 education wasn't the only thing discussed yesterday, right? We're in the middle of budget season where they're hearing the budget proposals from K through 12. We reviewed that last week. We also heard from the Early Childhood Development Agency this week, which they're looking for funds for early childhood development. But higher education's another group that goes to the Statehouse for taxpayer dollars. And we're talking about public universities, community colleges, and all of that. So there was a hearing yesterday in a House committee where they laid out the variety of things they're looking for when it comes to higher education spending.
So we will have 4 panels. Panel number 1 would be the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. Panel 2 would be Illinois Touring Initiative. Panel 3, Advance Illinois. And panel 4 would be Golden Apple.
And they're struggling already with their funds. We should be asking for it. I think I've got an appropriation, could be coming before this committee next week, asking for $26 million. Because it's our colleges who are feeling the pain, and God bless them for carrying the 3,100, 3,200 veterans on their rolls.
Those are many of the ones we were losing to other states. They're now going to our states, but if they can't get the piece that's MAP, then they're still going to go to Iowa and Alabama and everywhere else.
The state is getting sued for their minority teaching scholarship. Do you have any updates on that case?
I can't necessarily speak to the case itself. The governor did recommend that we continue to fund the program, and the courts will play out as they may. But as the program is still alive, we will hope to continue to support it and advocate for it.
So clearly there's a lot of issues there, from funding and veterans focus and the monetary award program dollars, and all of this costing taxpayer money while the state is mired in courts about a minority teacher scholarship, which the argument is you can't carve out money for certain people based on their race. So we'll see how that plays out in the courts. But obviously the governor, he wants $8 million in the budget for that program. Whether it survives court challenges, we shall see. But all of this costing your tax dollars, right? The governor last month proposed a budget that spends the most taxpayer dollars in state history. It's just under $55 billion in spending. It's about $2 billion more than what he has for the current fiscal year. And he proposes that with this line of revenue that some people are pointing out now is kind of make-believe, because he's going to have to change some laws to get that kind of revenue. He's going to have to raise taxes on a variety of different arenas, including casinos and cannabis growers and sellers and tax amnesty programs. So with those measures not in place right now, the way that the Illinois Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability reviews it, they say that their number for revenue for the coming fiscal year is much lower than the governor's. Well, okay, compare it, 1.some-odd% lower than what the governor's estimating. Here's Eric Noggle. He is with the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability yesterday, testifying in front of the House Revenue and Finance Committee.
Comparing our number of $54.2 billion would be compared to their number just a little below $55 billion. So again, a difference of $737 million. Again, I know that $737 million sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but from an overall standpoint, it's a difference of about 1.3%.
So a difference of 1.3%, and the reason for their difference is they're taking a more cautious approach. They said, listen, Illinois' economy will grow, but it will grow at a slower pace than the rest of the country. Took Illinois much longer to get out of the Great Recession than the rest of the country. It's taken Illinois longer to rebound from the pandemic, and in some sectors, we're still not to where we should be post-pandemic where we were pre-pandemic. There's also the indications that we're much more reliant on income taxes. If you look back 20 years ago, COGFA says the state budget reliance on income taxes was only 30%, but now it's upwards to 60%. So there's an over-reliance on income taxes, while we see corporate income taxes declining and sales taxes staying somewhat stagnant. People aren't going out and buying higher cost goods. There's a whole bunch of economic indicators they're taking into account for why they're taking a more cautious approach. But also you've got the issue of the proposed budget the governor has relies on $500 million of increased taxes.
So what are these $492 million revenue adjustments that they are counting on? That's shown on page 38. A lot of that is the expectation of a delinquent tax payment incentive program. I will just call it tax amnesty. It's amounting to around $204 million in total. Some of that will be on a line-by-line basis, including $50 million in personal income tax revenues they're hoping to receive from this tax amnesty program, $102 million in corporate, $50 million in the sales tax area, and $2 million from public utility tax revenues. There's also a deduction that they want to change related to personal income tax in the cannabis industry. The governor's office is wanting to pause that statutory increase in the shift in state sales tax on motor fuel that is supposed to be deposited in the road fund. If we don't have that increase in the amount that goes to the road fund, that will retain approximately $171 million for the state's general funds. The governor's office is also wanting to have a tax increase on the graduated tax structure for casinos. That is estimated to bring in another $100 million. So all of this $492 million would have to be passed by you guys and by the General Assembly and signed into law for it to happen.
So again, without it being in place, COGFA says that they're not going to add those revenues into their projections because there's going to be a bunch of political wrangling, and who knows, none of that could pass, or all of that could pass, or half of it could pass. Either way, they say that their number is 1.3% lower in the amount of tax dollars the state's expected to capture from you, the taxpayer, in order to spend in the largest state budget in state history. Here's more from Eric Noggle talking about the importance of why they're taking that cautious approach.
From a fiscal year 26 perspective, as shown, we are $737 million apart. Now, the remaining difference there is that the commission is just not as optimistic in its projections for some of the economically tied resources, such as the sales tax and the income taxes. At this time, the commission feels that a more cautious approach is warranted given the economic uncertainties related to the current volatile geopolitical climate, potential tariffs, changes in the federal workforce, and outcomes of other potential policy changes at the federal level.
So a lot of money coming into the state. How much is debatable? But it's going to be spent on all kinds of things like K-12 education taking up 25% of the state's budget. You've got higher education that takes up a substantial chunk. You've got pensions that are going to take another substantial chunk of the $55 billion spending plan. All your tax dollars and how much of that's actually going to benefit the state. We'll be watching and see how this debate washes out in the end. They've got a May 31st deadline to pass a budget with simple majorities. Those last couple of weeks of April, of May, rather, I will share with you as a reporter on the ground at the State House, are going to be brutal. So for the live show, you may see me red-eyed, and my hair might be a mess, and I might still be in my pajamas. I don't know. It's going to be every last couple of weeks of May. It's just chaos. All right, it's Illinois in Focus Daily. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here with YouTube and the Center Square. Go to the website, thecentersquare.com. Get the newsletter and stay up to date with what's going on here in Illinois and elsewhere. All right, make it happen.